Yo, it's the MOPOWERZ, and we are BACKAGAIN on a super Saturday afternoon. By the way, I'm sorry. I have been behind this morning. Late start. That's all I got to say about that. And I hope that you all are having a super Saturday as well. Sun is shining. People are out. Despite the cold, they're outside. But we're going to get straight into this. And I want to wish you all a happy Black History Month. And if you're not doing anything, accomplish something this month, even if it's just reading a book, even if it's just reading a book or changing your attitude towards others this month. That'd be a great way to start a change and see some change. You can't be having a frowning face when smiles are all in your face. You can't do that. But anyway, chapter 10, and this is the Mis-Education of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. And I hope you all have been taking notes. We're going to get straight off into this because I got a very busy day today. So we're going to get through this and you all study. Okay? And chapter 10 is entitled The Loss of Vision. The Loss of Vision. History shows then that as a result of these unusual forces in the education of the Negro, he easily learns to follow the line of least resistance rather than battle against odds for what real history has shown to be the right course. And speaking of resistance, did you all know that the theme for Black History Month this year is entitled Black Resistance? Now, what does that mean, Mo? I advise that you go and research Black theme for yourself and be your own judge of what it means to you and your family, okay? A mind that remains in the present atmosphere can never undergo sufficient development to experience what is commonly known as thinking. Damn. Wow, that is nuts. Something that's commonly known as thinking. How many of us think? Many of us don't even think because we've lost our common sense. No Negro thus submerged in the ghetto then will have a clear conception of the present status of the race or sufficient foresight to plan for the future. Did you hear what he just said? No Negro then submerged in the ghetto, living in the hood, will never have, then will have a clear conception of the present status of the race or sufficient foresight for the plans of the future. And he drifts so far towards compromise that he loses moral courage. The education of the Negro then becomes a perfect device for control from without. Those who purposely promote it have every reason to rejoice it, and Negroes themselves exultantly champion the course of the oppressor. I'm just saying. A comparison of the record of the spokesman of the race today with that of those of the 18th century shows a moral surrender. During the prolonged struggle between the French and the English in America, the Negroes held the balance of power at several strategic points and used it accordingly. Today, the Negro finds himself inconsequential because he can be parked on the side of the fence, meaning use them at your convenience, but once they're used up, you have no more use for them. Once your plan is done. So you're just leaving it on the side of the fence, side of the road, waiting at the bus stop. Don't you get it yet? When will Black people in America start thinking for themselves as a whole? Some say never. Just like in the book entitled The Confessions of Nat Turner, William Styron in that book speaks about Mr. Gray, who, according to the book, was Nat Turner's lawyer. And he said that slavery would last for 1,000 years. And I believe him because of the mindset of and the control that others have over their minds. Control a man's thinking, he will do. Mis-Education of the Negro. The same balance of power was evidenced also during the American Revolution, where the Negro soldiers insisted on serving side by side with others, meaning white people, white soldiers. Today, many Negroes are content as menials in the army. At that time, Negroes preached to mixed congregations. Today, we find Negroes busy separating them. Hope you got that. The 18th century Negro resented such thing as social distinctions. Today, Negroes are saying that they do not want social equality. Negroes of that epoch said with the ancient poet, I am a man and deem nothing that relates to man a matter of indifference to me. Today, however, the average Negro says, now I am a colored man, and you white folks must settle the matter among yourselves. At a still later date, the American Negro showed more courage than he does today with all of his so-called enlightenment. Smack, smack, smack. Did you get that? Smacked you down to the core. At a still later date, the American Negro showed more courage back then than he does today with all of his so-called enlightenment. Elijah Muhammad said that we've been made cowards. What do you think? When the free Negroes were advised 100 years ago to go to Africa, they replied that they would never separate themselves from the slave population of this country, as they were brethren in by the ties of consanguinity on suffering and wrong. Today, however, the Negro in the North turns up his nose at the crude migrant from the South who brings to the North the race problem, but along with it, more thrift and actual progress than the Northern Negro ever dreamed of. When again in 1816, yes, 1816, free Negroes like Richard Allen, James Forten, and Robert Purvis were referred to as foreign elements whose social status might not be secure in this country. Instead of permitting the colonizationists to shove them aside as criminals to be departed to a distant shore, they replied in no uncertain terms that this soil in America, which gave them birth, is their only true home. Here, their fathers fought, bled, and died for this country, and here they intend to stay. Today, when such things come up, you find Negroes appearing upon the scene to see how much pay they can obtain to assist in the proposed undoing of a race. Sad, but true. Anybody out there in the chat? Say something if you're out there in the chat. And if you're not in the chat, you need to be in the chat. Okay? And when you watch this live, share the information with relatives, friends, co-workers. Share the information. I'm just saying. Further emphasizing this thought of resistance, a few years later, Nathaniel Paul, a Baptist preacher of Albany, informed the colonizationists, yes, that the free Negroes would not permit their traducers to formulate a program for the race. You may go ahead with your plan to depart this element in order to make slavery secure, he warned, but the free Negroes will never immigrate to Africa. We shall stay here and fight until the foul monster is crushed. Slavery must go. Did I believe it would always continue, said he, and that man, to the end of time, would be permitted with impunity to usurp the same undue authority over his fellow? I would disavow any allegiance or obligation I was under to my fellow creatures, or any submission that I owed to the laws of my country. I would deny the superintending power of divine providence in the affairs of this life. I would ridicule the religion of the Savior of the world. I would ridicule the religion of the Savior of the world and treat as the worst of men the ministers of the everlasting gospels. Phew. Meaning, what? I will consider my Bible as a book of false and delusive fables and commit it to the flames. Nay, I will still go further. I would at once confess myself an atheist and deny the existence of a holy God. Now I'm going to stop right there, because I would have to agree with the man. Because if you are a black man living here in America, if you are a black woman living here in America, you should throw your Bible in the flames, because it is full of falsehood and fables. No one can even prove to me that the characters in the Bible ever even existed, nor can they produce grave sites or sepulchres where these great prophets of theirs even existed. Come on. It's 2023. If you are still into religion, I will have to question your intelligence. Granted, religion has some moralness to it, but it also has some stupefaction to it. Do you side with falsehood or do you side with truth? And sometimes the truth hurts, especially when you have been indoctrinated with religion. And religion, as we know, is a miseducation of the Negro. It is a band lock around your head, just as the cover of this book. That's right. The black woman with a band lock around her head. That's what religion does for you. Puts you in a frozen state of existence. And these Negroes of a century ago stood their ground and fought the pro-slavery deportionists to a standstill, with the exception of a few pioneers. The immigrants to Liberia were largely slaves manumitted on the condition that they would settle in Africa. These freedmen then could have no idea but those of slave-holding sections from which they were sent. They established, therefore, a slaveryocracy in Liberia, and Liberia has failed. Then it is no evidence of the failure of the Negro in government. It is merely evidence of the failure of slavery. The Negroes who are attacking Jim Crowism almost a century ago fearlessly questioned the constitutionality of such a provision. Speaking through Charles Lennox Redmond of that day, they said there is a distinction between social and civil rights. We all claim the privilege of selecting our society and associations, but in civil rights, one man has not the prerogative to define rights for another. These race distinctions react in all wickedness, to say nothing of their concocted and systemized odiousness and absurdity upon those who are liberal and mean and who are enough to practice them. And nowadays, however, we find some highly educated Negroes approving such Jim Crowism. Do you know what Jim Crow is out there? Jim Crow laws took place after slavery, after the Emancipation Proclamation. And one of those Jim Crow laws, if you didn't have a job, you was going to jail. Now, how could you leave slavery, be free from slavery, and then they legislate a law imprisoning you just because you don't have a job? And even like today, if you are homeless and in the streets in the state of Missouri, you're going to jail, and it's a felony. So it's safe to say, even in today's world, if you're homeless and you don't have a job, you're a criminal. And that's how they look at you. Even in states like Arizona and in Georgia, they're taking you to jail. Some parts of Arizona, some parts of Arizona. But the rent is so outrageous in Arizona, you're bound to be homeless. Just like you're bound to be homeless in Washington State. You're bound to be homeless in Portland, Oregon. You're bound to be homeless in the state of California and Florida and New York and Chicago. It is mad city out here. Mad city out here. And they made it that way. And they made it that way. And most people who are not making it in this country, the majority of people who are not making it is who? You're not going to say Mo told you so. Do your homework, okay? So you can say that you saw it for yourself. Now, the answer that you get, you might not like, but that's the answer that it is, okay? And nowadays, however, we find highly educated Negroes approving such Jim Crowism. For example, not many years ago, an outstanding Baptist preacher dabbling in politics in West Virginia suggested to the whites that they enact a Jim Crow car law in that state. And we had difficulty in crushing that sentiment. A few years thereafter, the author heard one of our bishops say that we should not object to such separations, for we want to be by ourselves. When this distinguished churchman died, the traducers of the Negro lauded him to the skies, and thoughtless members of the race, thinking that he deserved it, joined in the loud acclaim. In this way, the large majority of educated Negroes in the United States have accepted segregation and have become its fearless champions. Their filled but underdeveloped minds, excuse me, do not enable them. Let me get some water here. Sorry about that, you all. In this way, the large majority of the educated Negroes in the United States have accepted segregation and have become its fearless champions. Their filled but undeveloped minds do not enable them to understand that although an opiate furnishes temporarily relief, it does not remove the cause of the pain. In this case, we have yielded on principle to satisfy the mob, but have not yet found an ultimate solution of the problem at hand. In our so called democracy, we are accustomed to give the majority what they want rather than educate them to understand what is best for them. Phew. I want to say that again. In our so called democracy, we are accustomed to give the majority what they want rather than educate them to understand what is best for them. We do not show the Negro how to overcome segregation, but we teach him how to accept it as final and just. Numerous results from this policy may be cited. The white laboring man refuses to work with Negroes because of the false traditions that the Negro is an inferior. And at the same time, the Negro for the same reason becomes content with the menial service and drudgery. The politician excludes the Negro from the councils of his party and from the government because he has been taught that such is necessary to maintain the supremacy of his race, which is white supremacy. Just like you have all of those people in the Black Caucus, and all of those people that's in representatives and black mayors. Do they really? Do they? You have to ask yourself, do they really have any effect? Look at Maxine Waters. We just lost John Lewis, what, 2 years ago? Uh, who else is in the office, especially in the Black Caucus, that is helping us? And the NAACP, they're funded by the Jews. You mean to tell me we can't even fund our own organization without the financing from outsiders who view us as trash? I'm just saying. With all of the millions of dollars that all of these rich black slaves are making, they can't help fund this? I'm just saying. Now, granted, never mind, I'll keep going. The Negro, trained in the same school of thought, accepts this as final and contends for such meager consideration as the bosses may begrudgingly grant him. An irate resident in an exclusive district protests against an invasion by Negroes because he has learned that these poverty stricken people are carriers of disease and agents of crime. The Negroes, believing that such is the truth, remain content in the ghetto, when in reality it's the opposite way. And in reality, we don't carry the disease. The Europeans carry the disease all the way here to the American shores, where they found us. Some of us, we were already here when they got here. That's right. Europeans brought all the disease over here and made other diseases happen as well. I believe, what is that? The Gillian Wars? Yeah, the Gillian era. You check that out and you look at the disease that the Europeans brought to this country. Yet they say that you are disease infested and that you are prone to crime. Yet, is it not criminals who put other people in slavery? Are they not criminals for making you a slave? Were they not criminals when they raped your ancestors, like your great 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 grandmama, your great 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 aunt? Were they not criminals when they what made your uncle a eunuch, cut his balls off? But that's not criminalization. That's not being a criminal. And they leave you in the ghetto. But you must remember now, while you in this ghetto, the ghetto that you living in, you had white people living in that same ghetto before you were, because you were the slave. But prior to that, we roamed the country, and whatever cities and establishments that we had, they burned it down and took it all. They burned it down and took it all. Even our last best effort to maintain some dignity about ourselves, which was Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the U.S. government helped bomb that place. Black Wall Street is Black History Month, the Mis-Education of the Negro. If you haven't read the book, if you have not read a book this month, I highly recommend that you do so. I don't care what kind of book it is. but it needs to be a Black historical book, at least this month. And you can go on to your trash magazines, all of that stuff back in March, April, May, June. But every day is Black History Month. Every day. Because there's no way that Caucasians would have survived the conditions where they placed us under. There's no way. Just look at what happened to the Marmadukes. Oh, slap, slap, slap. I'm just saying. Now, an irate resident in an exclusive district protests against an invasion by the Negroes, okay? The irrational parent forces the separation of the races in some schools because his child must occupy a seat next to a pupil of tainted African blood. The educated Negro accepts this as inevitable and welcomes the makeshift to his people. Now, how can they say his blood is tainted when Caucasians come from Black people? This is what I'm talking about, the miseducation of the Negro, the miseducation of the Caucasians. Because Caucasians are miseducated too, really are, especially if they just are closed minded to that which they've been educated in the concentration camps in the institutions of America. And those concentration camps are schools. White people have been miseducated too. I'm just saying. Children of the Negroes are excluded from the playgrounds because of the assertion that they will contaminate those of the whites. Like when you get in the pool of a white person, some Caucasians are so ignorant. You should just call them white niggers. Some Caucasians are so ignorant that you should just call them white niggers. I'm just saying. And some of them probably wouldn't even have a problem with that because they know they're ignorant. And their minds have been tainted. If Black people blood are tainted, white people blood are tainted because Caucasians come from the Black man and Black woman. That's not up for debate. I don't care what school of thought you come from. If you don't understand that, I would have to label you as unintelligent. Children of the Negroes are excluded from the playgrounds because of the assertion that they would contaminate those of the whites. The Negroes yielding settled down to a policy of having their children grow up in a neglected fashion in the most undesirable part of the city. The Negro is forced to ride in a Jim Crow car to stamp upon him more easily the badge of his inferiority. That's right, because that's what Jim Crow laws and Jim Crow cars does. They stamp you inferior. And some Black people become content with being inferior, with being a tomato that people steps on and crush all day long. The Negro is forced to ride in a Jim Crow car to stamp upon him more easily the badge of his inferiority. The educated Negro accepts it as settled and abandons the fight against the social proscription. And thus goes segregation, which is the most far reaching development in the history of the Negro since the enslavement of the race. In fact, it is a sequel of slavery. It has been made possible by our system of miseducating innocent people who did not know what was happening. It is so subtle that men have participated in promoting it without knowing what they were doing. Teachers and preachers. We have been reduced to teachers and preachers. We was always their entertainment, boxing, basketball, whatever entertainment white people needed during that time, which was mostly boxing. And what did we do? We beat upon one another while the slave masters laughed at us. Common sense is Gone. They beat out your common sense, making you brainless, unthinkable. And they knew that. That's why they're not worried about black people as a whole waking up to consciousness like we did centuries, yeah, ago. Because we was conscious then. Because blacks today are worse off than they were. I'm not saying that we should go back to slavery. Fuck no. If you want to be a slave, go to prison, okay? I'm just saying. I'm not for being in chains, shackles, none of that, especially in the head. We didn't have all of the distractions that we have now. We didn't have drugs. We didn't have all of that crazy music. We had unity. We weren't in competition with each other. And remember, when you are in competition with someone, especially if you're racing and you look over to your competitor, you lose sight of your own goal, even if it's for a split second. And that second will allow you to lose the race. Mhm. You know how you're working on a project, whatever it may be, and you at work, especially if you work in schools or you work in malls, especially malls, and you be working, and the next thing you know, you see a pretty lady walk by, and your eyeballs follow her backside, distracted from what you were doing. It's that simple. It's that simple. And when black people become successful, when black men become successful, who do they send to you? A pretty white lady. How many rich white women pick up poor black men? Ask Kim Kardashian, if Kanye was broke, would she have chosen him? If he wasn't on TV, if he wasn't in the music industry, and if he was broke on the south side of Chicago, would she have chosen him? Would she have let him in her panties? The answer is into the no. Something to think about. Now, and thus the Negro segregation, which is the most far-reaching development in the history of Negroes since the enslavement of the race. In fact, it is a sequel of slavery. It has been made possible by our system of miseducation, of miseducating innocent people who did not know what was happening. And they still don't know what's going on today. And they still don't know what's going on today. And thus goes segregation, which is as far reaching the development in the history of the Negro since what? The enslavement of the race. There are a few defenders of segregation who are doubtless sincere. Although nominally free, they have never been sufficiently enlightened to see the matter other than as slaves. One can cite cases of Negroes who opposed emancipation and denounced the abolitionists. What? One can cite cases of Negroes who opposed emancipation and denounced the abolitionists. You see how stupefied that we've been made? Even the slaves back then say that we don't want to be free. We don't want those abolitionists over here. And some of those abolitionists, all of them were white, Caucasian people. And you, with your silly self, say that you don't want to be free. You still say that today. That's why the white man ain't worried about you, because he controls your thinking. A still larger number made no effort to become free because they did not want to disconnect themselves from their masters, and their kind still object to full freedom. Crazy. Boxer rocks. Miseducation of the Negro. Ever since the Civil War, when Negroes were first given a chance to participate in the engagement of their affairs, they've been inconsistent and compromising. They've tried to gain one thing on one day by insisting of equality for all, while at the same time endeavoring to gain another point the next day by segregation. At one moment, Negroes fight for the principle of democracy, and at the very next moment, they barter it away for some temporary advantage. You cannot have a thing and dispose of it all at the same time. For example, the Negro political leaders in the Reconstruction period clamored for suffrage and the right of holding office, serving in the militia, and sitting on the jury, but few of them wanted white and colored children to attend the same school. When expressing themselves on education, most of them took the position of the segregationists. And Charles Sumner, in his fight for civil rights of the Negro, had to eliminate mixed schools from his program, not only because many whites objected, but also because the Negroes themselves did not seem to want them. All of these leaders might not have been looking for jobs in those days. All of these leaders might not have been looking for jobs in those days, but as nominal freedmen who were still slaves, they did not feel comfortable in the presence of their former masters. These timorous men were very much like some Negroes who were employed near the author's home in Virginia by a northern farmer who had moved into the state after the Civil War. When breakfast time came in the morning, he called them in to eat at the table with his family. These actual slaves, however, immediately lost their appetite. One finally called the employer aside and settled the matter in another way. He said, "Now, boss, you ain't used to do rules of this country, because that's how we talk. Now, boss, you ain't used to the rules in this country. We just can't sit at the table with white folks. We've been used to eating a cake or a bread out yonder. Twin do plow handles let us go out there." Yeah, they not eating with slave masters. The slave master wanted to give them some real food. And they like, no, just give us a piece of corn, a piece of bread, and we'll go out yonder and just sit in the back. The system therefore has extended from one thing to another until the Negroes today find themselves hedged in by the color bar almost every way they turn, and set off by themselves. The Negroes cannot learn from the examples of others with whom they might come into contact. In the ghetto, too, they are not permitted to construct and carry out a program of their own. These segregating institutions interfere with the development of self helping among Negroes. Far often, Negroes fail to raise money to establish institutions which they might control, but they readily contribute large sums for institutions which segregates persons of African blood. Sounds familiar today? Sounds familiar today. We got maybe like two more pages, and I'm just going to run through them. You all just have to do some studying yourself, but I'm dropping jewels on you. I'm dropping jewels on you. I hope you get them. Denied participation in the higher things of life, the educated Negro himself joins to with ill-designing persons to handicap his people by systemized exploitations. Feeling that the case of the Negro is hopeless, the educated Negro decides upon the course of personally profiting by whatever he can do and using these people as a means to an end. He grins in their faces while extracting money from them. But his heart shows no fond attachment to their despised cause. With a little larger income than they receive, he can make himself somewhat comfortable in the ghetto, and he forgets those who have no way to escape. Sounds like teachers and preachers. Sounds like the black politician. Okay. Jesse, Jesse, Jesse helped make you an African American. How many names are we supposed to have? We supposed to have like, we went from slaves, niggas, to Negroes, to black people. Now we African American. What are we going to be tomorrow? Then you have other black people saying they're Muslims, they're Hebrews, confused, miseducated people. And those who are of the religious sects call themselves what the oppressor called themselves. Whew. Niggas going crazy. I'm just saying. Some of this educated class joined with the unprincipled real estate. Some of this uneducated class, some of this educated class joined with unprincipled real estate men in keeping Negroes out of desirable parts of the city and confining them to unsanitary sections. Such persons helped the profiteer to collect from Negroes, thus cornered a larger rental than exacted from the whites for the same property. Sound like the preacher man does that, because the preacher man takes your Sunday money, the money that you give him Sunday in that basket, he takes it to the bank, and the banks give it to Caucasian folks who redevelops the community and gentrify you out. And you can't even get a bank loan. But the reverend can. And the reverend don't live in the ghetto. I'm just saying. And if he does, his house has gates around it. That which you see around his property is clean. He drives Cadillac, and ain't nobody robbing Reb. But he's been robbing the people all along of their common sense and a pocketbook, because he has become like the oppressor, live off the exploitation of the downtrodden people. Y'all better stop playing with me. It's Black History Month. Now, it says here that in similar fashion, a Negro minister, God, sometimes goes into a community where the races are moving along amicably together in their churches and rents a shack or an old empty store and start a separate church for our people, not to supply any practical need, but to exploit those who have never learned to think. Professional men, too, walking in their footsteps, impose also upon the poor innocent Negroes who do not know when they are being treated properly and when they are not. But high fees may be obtained from them as much as they cannot always go to others for service. Setting in the community with mixed schools, the educated Negro often advocates for separation that his daughter may secure a position in the system. The Negro politician is accustomed to corner the Negro vote by opening a separate office from which he may bargain with the chieftains of the machine for the highest price available. When paid off by some positions, which is not very lawfully, the office holder accepts such employment with the understanding that he will be set off by himself as if he were destructive of the rest of mankind. In the present crisis, however, the highly educated Negroes find very little to exploit, and in their untoward condition, they have no program of finding a way out. They see numerous instances of Negroes losing jobs in white establishments, which is of today as well. Looking at all of these department stores are closing, people are going to be left out in the street. In fact, these things occur daily. Janitors who have been giving satisfaction are abruptly told that they will no longer be needed. Negro waiters in hotels are being informed that their place will go to white workers. Negro truck drivers are ordered to step down and let the needy of the other race go up. We hear so much of this that we wonder what the outcome would be. And this readjustment, of course, when there are fewer opportunities left for those who cannot do or do not have the opportunity to operate machines, the Negro will naturally be turned out of their positions by their employers who think first of their own race. In the ultimate passing of the Depression, however, Negroes will not be much better off when some of the whites now displacing them will rise to higher levels. In the economic order of tomorrow, there will be little use for the factum or scallion. That word is FACTOTUM or scallion, SCUILLION. Y'all look that up, okay? But from the context of the sentence, that means they won't have no room for you. That's what it says. So the future is looking very not so good right now. I'm serious because you cannot continue to function in this way. You see all of the homeless people in the streets. All of the homeless people in the streets. Now, granted, they have to make it look that way. They got to sacrifice some of their own soldiers, meaning Caucasian people. They have to have some of them out there looking bad so that you can't say that it's all just black people. They have to give everybody a little taste. But for the majority, they're up there somewhere. I'm all the way up. Well, the majority of the people is all the way down, and the minority of the people is all the way up. How about that? I had to correct myself. Now it says here, man will not need such personal attention when he can buy a machine to serve him more efficiently. Just like they're using robots today, taking the place of human beings. Have you seen the robot cops in San Francisco? Have you seen the robot waiters? The many Negroes, the aggregate of parasites whom the highly educated Negro has exploited, would not be needed on tomorrow, as I stated. What then will be of our highly educated Negroes who have no initiative? We have appealed to the talented tenth for a remedy, but they have nothing to offer. Their minds have never functioned in this all important spirit. The educated Negro shows no evidence of vision. He should see a new picture. The Negroes are facing the alternative of rising in the spirit of production to supply their own proportion of the manufacturers and merchants, or of going down to the graves of paupers. The Negroes must now do for himself or die out as the world undergoes readjustment. Yeah, we're dying out because we're killing ourselves and we are producing nothing. Even look at your entertainers, all of this money that they make. There should not be one black person homeless in America. With all of the money that these black slaves who got long money, there should not be one black person homeless here. There should not be one white person homeless here. No one should be homeless in America. If you've traveled the country like I have and you see all of this great land, vast land that is empty, they want it that way. If they wanted it better, they would make it better, but they don't want to make it better. And when I say they don't want to make it better, I'm talking about those who rule this country. They don't want to make it better for the little people. If they make it better for the little people, that means their lifestyle have to change just a itty bitty, just a 1%. but you continue to go out there and vote for them. They don't care about you. They're exploiting you. If the whites are to continue for some time enduring drudgery to the exclusion of Negroes, the latter must find another way out. Nothing forces this upon one more dramatically than when he learns that white women in Montgomery, Alabama, are coming to the back door of Negro homes asking for their washing. If the whites have reached this extremity, and they must be taken care of first, what would be left for the Negroes? Now, you think I'm talking about, this back in the 60s and the 30s and the 20s, it's still taking place today. Times have changed. Slavery and economic depravity has just been upgraded. You think you're making money. Just pay your bills and see how much money you have left. Pay your bills and see how much money you have left. At this moment, then, the Negroes must begin to do the very thing which they have been taught that they cannot do. They still have some money and they have needs to supply. They must begin immediately to pool their earnings and organize industries to participate in supplying social and economic demands. If the Negroes are to remain forever removed from the producing atmosphere and the present discrimination continues, there would be nothing left for them to do. There is no reason for lack of confidence because of the recent failure of the Negro enterprises. Although the highly educated Negroes assert the contrary, this lack of confidence is the cause of the failure of these enterprises. If the Negro had manifested enough confidence in them and had properly supported them, they would have been strong enough to stand in the test in the crisis. Negro banks, as a rule, have failed because the people taught that their own pioneers in business cannot function in this sphere withdrew their deposits. An individual cannot live after you extract the blood from its veins. An individual cannot live when you extract the blood from their veins. The strongest bank in the United States will last only so long as the people will have sufficient confidence in it to keep their money there. In fact, the confidence of the people is worth more than money. Did you hear what I said? The confidence in the people is worth more than money. The lack of confidence of the Negro in himself and in his possibilities is what keeps him down. Don't you ever give up on your dreams. You have to have confidence in yourself. You have to have that in order for people to have confidence in you. His miseducation has been a perfect success in this respect. His miseducation has been a perfect success in this respect. Yet it is not necessary for the Negro to have more confidence in his own workers than in others. If the Negro would be as fair to his own as he has been to others, this would be all that is necessary to give him a new lease of life and start the trend upward. But we don't trust each other with a dollar. We don't trust each other with nothing except going to the liquor store or going half on a sack. Crazy. Crazy. We trust ourselves with money, with little money for destruction, but won't trust ourselves with little money for upliftment. That's still going on today. Ask all of these big YouTubers that's arguing with themselves over nothing. And neither one of them has bought a solution. How many big YouTubers do we got out there? I'm just saying, it can't nobody get together and do nothing for the people. Nobody. Hey, I'm just saying. I'm just saying. They rob you. They robbed you. You know, with their little fund me, fund me, fund me, fund me. Let me get that cash app. Cash, would you? Fund me, fund me. Thanks for the demo. I'm not gonna say no names of these people who have scammed people out their money on YouTubers. That's big YouTubers. I'm not gonna do that. They know who they are. But the little guy like myself, who's actually working, educating myself to help the downtrodden people can't get a dime. I can't even get 1,000 subscribers. I'm just saying. But I get there. So you all press that like button, press that subscribe button right now. Share the information. Like the information. Press the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. By forgetting the schoolroom for the time being and relying upon awakening of the masses through adult education, we can do much to give the Negro a new point of view with respect to economic enterprise and group cooperation. The average Negro has not been sufficiently miseducated to become hopeless. Our minds must be sufficiently developed to use segregation to kill segregation, and thus bring to pass the ancient and yet modern prophecy. The wrath of man shall praise thee. If the Negro in the ghetto must eternally be fed by the hand that pushes him into the ghetto, he will never become strong enough to get out of the ghetto. This assumption of the Negro leadership in the ghetto then must be confined to matters of religion, educated, and social upliftment. It must deal with the fundamental forces in life as to make these things possible. If the Negro, if the Negro area, however, is to continue as a district supported wholly from without, the in-depth dwellers therein will merit and will receive only the contempt of those who may occasionally catch glimpses of them in their plight. Sad but true. All cultures of people are on code except us. I'm going to say that again. All cultures of people are on code except us. As Frederick Douglass said in 1852. If you don't know who Frederick Douglass is and your child is in school, shame on you as a parent. 100. And you wonder why your children are mentally ill. It is because they have been ill prepared and miseducated, and you, as a parent, have done no part in educating your child. How many Black parents out there right now help their children with their so-called homework that they're sending their child to school to be educated with? How many of you parents help your children with that which you send them to school for? I'm just saying. As Frederick Douglass said in 1852, it is vain that we talk of being men if we do not the work of men. Smack, smack, smack. We must become valuable to society and other departments of industry than those servile ones from which we are rapidly being excluded. We must show that we can do as well as they are. When we can build as well and live in our houses, we can make for ourselves shoes. If we can build houses, we can make shoes. That's what the man is saying. And you have to understand his grammar at that point. And I have to understand the grammar of these people at that point and how they spoke. Just like when a slave had spoke to the Caucasian man who wanted the slaves to eat at the table with him. And he said, what? Nah, master, you don't know the rules of this country. You know how it go. But anyway, we must show that we can do as they do. Society continues, Douglas, is a hard-hearted affair. With it, the helpless may expect no higher dignity than that of paupers. The individual must lay society under obligation to him, or society will honor him only as a stranger and a sojourner. And that, my people, is chapter 10 for the Mis-Education of the Negro. In fact, I think it's been one of the longest chapters of the book so far. And when we come back, we will be in chapter 11. There are 17 chapters in this book. And after this book, there's going to be another book. And we're just going to keep them rolling. But however, I ask you to seriously educate yourself in some form of upliftment. If you don't, we're going to die. Your kids are going to die. And who wants baby kids? Who wants baby kids? I'm just saying. Leave your comments in the comment section. It's your brother, the MOPOWERZ, where knowledge is power. Remember, it is your third eye that makes you shine like jewelry. And if you haven't done so already, press that subscribe button, view the videos, hit the notification bell. Who is that? King Ari, Black Power. Black Power family. Keep it black all day. And as the general say, we'll be black tomorrow. But yeah, I want to thank you all for watching this live. And by all means, never ever give up on your dreams. Thanks for viewing, you all. We will see you tomorrow. Peace out.